guests who are going to present their work. And just so we stay on schedule, we're going to start straight away with Carlos and Gemma, using collaborative practice, just did.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're glad to be here. Thank you for coming this morning. And
yes, today we are going to talk about the Jungian concept of soul image, anima or animus. Confrontation with this archetype represents the second stage of the process of individuation. At the beginning of the mystery of the conjunctio, Edward Edinger poses an interesting question: why alchemy? He answers, in their zeal to investigate those newly opened vistas, they, the alchemists, projected their fantasies and dream images into matter. In effect, they dreamed a vast collective dream using chemical operations and materials as imagery and subject matter for that dream. Alchemy is that great collective dream, and what makes it so important for us is that it's a dream of our ancestors. The alchemists were rooted in the Western psyche, which we've inherited, so their imagery, their fantasy, their dream is our fantasy and our dream. Unquote. Alchemy is perhaps the best analogy to illustrate the process of individuation and the union of opposites, first at a psychological level and eventually at inner and outer levels. For Carl Jung, the self represents this complex alchemical operation that involves the integration of different polarities. He argues, quote, "The self, a psychic totality, also has a conscious as well as an unconscious aspect. When it represents a complexio oppositorum, a union of opposites, it can also appear as a united duality in the form, for instance, of Tao, as the interplay of yang and yin. Empirically, therefore, the self appears as a play of light and shadow, although conceived as a totality and unity in which the opposites are united." Unquote. Jung called this the tertium non datur, or transcendent function, because what happens transcends the opposites. Quote, "Out of the collision of opposites, the unconscious psyche always creates a third thing of an irrational nature, which the conscious mind neither expects nor understands. It presents itself in a form that is neither a straight yes nor a straight no." Unquote. When one talks of tertium non datur, one is talking of the reconciling third, not logically foreseeable, characteristic of a resolution in a conflict situation when the tension between opposites has been held in consciousness. The transcendent function is a psychic function that arises from the tension between conscious and unconscious and supports their union. Jung explains, when there is a full party of the opposites attested by the ego's absolute participation in both, this necessarily leads to a suspension of the will, for the will can no longer operate when every motive had an equally strong counter-motive, since life cannot tolerate at standstill a damming up of the vital energy results, and this would lead to an insupportable condition did not the tensions of opposites produce a new uniting function that transcends them. This function arises quite naturally from the regression of libido caused by the blockage." Unquote. The tendencies of the conscious and the unconscious are the two factors that together make up the transcendent function. It is called transcendent because it makes the transition from one attitude to another organically possible. Sharp explains, active imagination is a method of assimilating unconscious contents, dreams, fantasies, etc., through some form of self-expression. He comments, "The object of active imagination is to give a voice to sides of the personality, particularly the anima, animus, and the shadow, that are normally not heard, thereby establishing a line of communication between consciousness and the unconscious. Even when the end products, drawing, painting, writing, sculpture, dance, music, etc., are not interpreted, something goes on between creator and creation that contributes to a transformation of consciousness. The first stage of active imagination is like dreaming with open eyes. It can take place spontaneously or be artificially induced." In Jungian psychology, anima is the inner feminine side of man. For Jung, quote, the anima is both a personal complex and an archetypal image of woman in the male psyche. It is an unconscious factor incarnated anew in every male child and is responsible for the mechanism of projection, unquote. Contrarily, animus is the inner masculine side of woman. Jung explains, the animus is the deposit, as it were, of all woman's ancestral experiences of man. As Jan Rebis comments, each pole of the psyche is secretly united to the other pole, which maintains it and provocates it. Anima is feminine. It is just a pattern in the masculine psyche, and it is a figure that compensates the masculine conscious mind. In woman, it operates inversely. The element of the compensation is embodied with a masculine character. That is why it's called animus. Thus, as Jung explains, quote, the existence of the contrasexual complexes means that in any relationship between a man and a woman, there are at least 4 personalities involved. Rebis comments that for Jung, anima and animus have a character that is deeply real. Therefore, there are definitely not abstract concepts. Moreover, they operate, since the beginning, as true autonomous personalities that serve as a determining factor in the evolution of psychism, which implies that the human psyche is radical dual since the beginning, and also that this duality is originally of an androgynous nature. But from that moment on, this phenomenon has to be conceived as a double asymmetrical androgyny. Rebis also indicates that Jung's theory does not imply that man and woman derive from the same primordial androgyne. On the contrary, man and woman represent hermaphrodite psychic structures that function in an androgynous way. June Singer argues, quote, when we begin to recognize androgyny as an essential reality of human nature, we begin to move toward a world in which individual roles and the modes of personal behavior can be freely chosen. Androgyny has the power to liberate the individual from the confines of the appropriate, unquote. It is worth mentioning that Singer marks a clear distinction between androgyny, hermaphroditism, and bisexuality. But for the purposes of this paper, we have decided to use the terms androgyne and hermaphrodite interchangeably, following more likely alchemical papers. Now we will provide some clues of R.B. Dharma's origin and antecedents. I'll leave you with Gemma.
Many years before R.B. Dharma was born, in late August 2006, Carlos made this digital collage that he entitled Rebis. In the center of the picture, there is a small portrait which is a fusion of Gemma's and Carlos' faces. Intuitively, this image anticipated what would happen more than a decade later. We will start by explaining a brief chronology of our collaborative enterprise. Our first project was called Synesthesia, a spectacle of live creativity that combined drawing, music, performance, and costume and set design. The spectacle had different formats, but in the following photographs, we will show one of which the audience suggests random words that were sent via mobile phone to an app that shuffled them, creating a random juxtapositions. Inspired or challenged by these concepts, Carlos and the guest musician performed on scene. Carlos drew the musician played a number of instruments to illustrate the concepts generated by the word combinations. Both the music and the illustrations produced with the method were quite bizarre, but also poetic. In some cases, they provided ideas that were later developed with more detail. I was in charge of costume and set design. Many artists have used collaborative approaches as a creative methodology to make artifacts, among the other things, with the pretensions of experimenting and obtaining unexpected results or simply to enjoy a communal experience. Additionally, a number of artists have used alchemical symbolism in their works, and some have especially addressed the concept of the androgyne. We will mention just a few examples of both categories. With the playful style that characterized his life and career, Marcel Duchamp had the courage to intervene Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, adding her a bird. It is common belief that Mona Lisa actually represents Da Vinci's anima, a self-portrait of his female side, and some even see anagram anima soul, hidden in the name Mona Lisa. We are not claiming that, but considering Duchamp might have had access to sources such as Josephine Paladin's book, as John Murphy suggests, one wonders if beyond the apparently innocent defacement of the Mona Lisa hides an attempt to say something else. Duchamp also transformed the French saying Rose c'est la vie into the anagram Rose c'est la vie, the name of a female character that he impersonated. At first, this could seem a type of mischievous prank, but keeping in mind Duchamp was really interested in alchemy, his travestied performance became quite meaningful. He explained, quote, "Alchemy is a kind of philosophy, a kind of thinking that leads to a way of understanding. We also may call this perspective tantric, as Brancusi would say, or, as you would like to say, perennial. The androgyne, for example, is universal. The androgyne is above philosophy. If one has become the androgyne, one no longer has a need for philosophy," unquote. Thus, according to his own words, his impersonation of Rose Salavi might have been an attempt of achieving a particular and superior state of consciousness. Another example is a French surrealist artist Claude Hutton, who was a transgender artist before her time. Hutton challenged traditional concepts or fixed gender definitions and advocated in favor of bisexuality, androgyny, and transsexuality. When asked about her gender, she answered, quote, "Masculine, feminine, it depends on the situation. Neuter is the only gender that always suits me," unquote. Thus, it could be said that she also integrated anima-animus polarities in the characters she impersonated in his portraits and self-portraits.
Exquisite Corpse is a game invented by the Surrealists in 1925. It was an adaptation of a previously existing parlor language chain game called the Game of Consequences. The game involves several people composing a sentence, text, or drawing on a folded paper in which none of the participants is allowed to see what the rest are drawing in their respective segments. Through this process of collective creation, the final images show strange juxtapositions that can be related to the apparently random association process that operates in dreams. Eventually, when the final piece is read or revealed, the results are always surprising and unexpected. Surrealists used the Exquisite Corpse with the purpose of, quote, "sending the mind's critical mechanism away on vacation and fully releasing its metaphorical potentialities," unquote. Surrealists were more interested in the pleasure derived from the play experience than in the materiality of the artifacts produced with the game and in having access to the unconscious. M.E. Warlick discusses the relevance of alchemy in the work of German Dadaist surrealist artist Max Ernst, and he explains the importance of the androgyne as a recurring motive throughout his career. As regards the robbing of the bride, Warlick sees many references of the hermaphrodite, for instance, in the smaller painting in the background, which contains another red-robed androgyne. He comments, quote, "The small hermaphrodite combines the genitals of both sexes, and its pregnant belly, as well as the colorful metamorphosis of its wing from green to red, suggests the imminent transformation of primal matter and the birth of the red philosopher's stone. The central figure is an androgynous combination of the queen's nude female body and the king's red robe, topped by a double-headed figure composed of a full-face male owl and a female owl in profile. Ernst's robbing of the bride thus suggests the chemical wedding of sulfur and mercury, the rendering phase of rubedo, the sexual conjunction of the king and queen. Their union produces the philosopher's stones, an androgynous substance capable of its own multiplication, hence the duplicate painting in the background," unquote. Burroughs and Geisin's Third Mind is another example of this alchemy between artists. Brian Geising and William Burroughs refer to the psychic phenomenon that manifests during shared artistic sessions as the third mind, a superior and unseen collaborator that shows when two minds work together. About their collaborative project, they explain, quote, "It is not the history of a literary collaboration, but rather the complete fusion in a praxis of two subjectivities that metamorphose into a third. It is from this collusion that a new author emerges, an absent third person, invisible and beyond grasp, decoding the silence."
Creative artistic games might be a good strategy to generate collaborative dynamics and therefore to generate third minds. Exquisite corpse in particular may be a good option because it utilizes very simple mechanics that can be applied to a number of different artistic language and media. With reference to use of the surrealist game in contemporary art, Kanta Koshar Lingman, Davis Schinderman, and Tom Dellinger argue, quote, "The exquisite corpse, following a simple but continuously elaborated algorithm, endlessly reinvents itself and reappears in a number of different contexts," unquote. Indeed, since the surrealists invented the pictorial version of the exquisite corpse, the game has been played by a number of artists, including, as you see, Jen and Dinos Chapman, Steve Wolf, Ashley Bickerton, Jan Hasheo, Christian Marclay, Oliver Mosset, and Alex Lambert, Roy Dowell, Tom Quenchel, Megan Willis, and Larry Pittman, Marilyn Minter, David Sandlin, and Sue Williams. Now we'll talk about the type of collaborative practice that led to the birth of R.B. Dharma. The creative strategies we use mainly include experimental films, exquisite corpse, text and images, and collaborative drawings. After filming Dreams of a Bird Man in 2009, we have been adding characters and situations to that project that considerably expand the narrative. In most cases, Carlos draws the characters and I design the costumes. One of the games we tested extensively during these past years was the Exquisite Corpse, which was essentially to our practice because it contains key elements of play dynamics, including the rules are very simple, hence it is quite easy to explain the game to another person. It generates great interactivity among players, which in turn increases motivation and reinforces human bonds. It has a good deal of surprise. No one knows what the results will look like until the very end. One is able to manage the balance between skills and challenges according to one's singular abilities. It creates intertextuality by the juxtapositions of distant elements in ways that create new symbols and meanings. And finally, it is inspired by depth psychology.
Spies mentions that Max Ernst did not like the Exquisite Corpse game because afterwards people tried to identify the authors of each segment. In our case, in order to avoid that, we intentionally proposed the use of the exact same material to make less evident the patch of lines. Strangely enough, when we show our work to other people, everyone thinks that the images were done by the same hand. Additionally, apart from using the same material, as the images are usually digitized, faults disappear. We are the only ones who can recognize who did what, but instead of being upset, we were very happy with this misunderstanding because our intention is precisely to achieve the most perfect blending of the lines to grant prominence to the unconscious connection between us. But people's confusion about the supposed author of the Exquisite Corpses made us think. If the work produced by the two different hands was regarded as done by just one hand, perhaps they were right after all. During the process of creating our work, at a certain level, maybe we were actually melting into a single entity. We see this phenomenon as the third mind, the collective mind that emerges with this type of interactive practices. Oliver Harris points out the similarities between Burroughs' cat-up game and Exquisite Corpse include group interaction and the pleasure of engaging in a collaborative play activity in which one produces something that is more than the sum of the parts. Another practice we tried, it's this one. It's called collaborative drawings. free play collaborative drawings. This game consists in drawing with one or more people in turn until we are satisfied with the result and or feel that it is finished. A significant technical aspect of these drawings is that we always draw it without sketching. Free play drawing consists in constructing an iconographic schema that serves as a starting point for drawing improvisation, following from jazz concepts. We usually begin drawing familiar motifs and then jump to variations. One of the key differences between this exercise and the exquisite corpse is that in collaborative drawing, one is able to see the whole piece all the time. There are more examples. Even though we do not claim that free play drawings are the result of automatism, we acknowledge that our approach owes much to the technique developed by the surrealists, particularly regarding their interest in releasing unconscious contents. Clark Pauling explains that with automatic drawing practice, André Masson tried to avoid rational thinking processes in order to eclaire the unconscious foundation of the self. He points out Masson's automatic drawings show a disintegrated self opposed to a suggestion of unity. Our free play drawings also exhibit fragmented imagery that makes new wholes, as if they were drawn collage. This actually manifests in many of our artworks, new associations of previously separated things.
This is not something that happened to us, but there might be some difficulties with these types of approaches. Ingrid Schaffner argues the challenge in collaboration is striking the delicate balance between retaining commitment and relinquishing control. Indeed, considering drawing is generally a rather individualistic activity, the exercise is very valuable for observing how one reacts to or interacts with other people and what kind of results are produced together through this dialogical artistic exercise. Hence, one of the key difficulties of collective drawing is to sacrifice one's ego and to deal with the results without losing motivation. Even though we had been drawing and working collaborative for many years, the idea of third mind did not emerge until July 9, 2018 at 1:30 p.m., the moment when Dharma was officially born. She seemed to be quite intelligent because he chosen the beautiful coastal town of Cadaqués to manifest his existence for the first time. In order to know Abhidharma better, I made his her natal chart. You can see on the left of the slide. In case you are not familiar with astrology, in a very succinct way, in the moment of birth, archetypes of a yin or yang polarity enter in the dual wall and locate in elements and signs of both natures, being able to emphasize some part of the psyche, either masculine or feminine, regardless of the individual's gender. General things that are visible in Abhidharma natal chart, as androgyny is the key theme in her life, is it important to observe how the type of energy is balanced in the chart. Although there is a certain preponderance of water, there is observable equilibrium between the yin and yang principles. A capacity to be initiator of them that speak to the soul is visible, and also to make the unconscious fruitful. Earth, a talent to sustain, nourish, and to be commitment to projects and relationships. Fire, which provides a self-expression, creativity, motivation, and foresight. Water, strong connection with the inner wall, ability to understand the individual and collective, unconscious, and also taboos, and ability to study the past with visible holistic skills. And air, great capacity for being objective or relating with others, seeking for balance and consensus, capacity to generate a social network that works in favor of evolutionary and humanistic changes. Yes.
During the last year, we have been trying to give Abhidharma more consistency or materiality. We created an email account for him, her. We started a blog, and we printed a book. Here is the book. You can see it later if you want. At the moment, we are talking with artists who might be interested in collaborating to expand Abhidharma's consciousness. So here we'll pass to the conclusion. Abhidharma was born to help us work with our anima and animus archetypes and thus to advance in our process of individuation. For us, Abhidharma manifests mercurial characteristics. Mercury is the most mutable archetype and it represents the mind. Its hermaphrodite and ductile characteristics allow it to travel from the unconscious into consciousness and thus to link the two main pillars, Luna, Yin, and Sun, Yang, the soul and the spirit or anima and animus respectively. Mercury also connects the two personal archetypes, Venus and Mars, which represent receptivity, interior, and action, exterior. Mercury exists in a continuous trip between realities. For that reason, it is regarded as the god of liminality and the constructor of bridges between the other planetary archetypes, which allows the communication among them. Therefore, we see these bridging characteristics operating in the way Abhidharma manifests. At the same time, considering the kinds of images Abhidharma originates, we think he/she also embodies Mercury's higher octave, Uranus, because this archetype is the alarm clock that awakens humanity from its collective dream, activating a higher level of consciousness. Like Uranus, Abhidharma burst into our lives, opening our minds to a world of possibilities and revelations. Paradoxically, he is always leading us towards the Neptunian dissolution of our individual egos, transmuting us into a new whole, which is precisely what enables Abhidharma to exist. Thank you very much.